In a relentless world, connected, but alone, trapped by illusion. But there is another path, where the battle to belong begins.
It was around 3 years ago. I was 17 years old and I worked at the local library in my city. The library was located in the middle of the city, but was totally abandoned in the evenings. I only worked in the evenings, when all the older staff had already gone home. My colleague and I were the only one left there that night. As it was the day before Christmas and a blizzard was going on outside, not one single customer inhabited the building. My colleague Thomas was down at ground level, while I was sitting at my desk on the top level. Normally, I would take the time to study, but it was the holidays and I was completely bored to death. The library was recently renovated, so I could look outside through the big windows that they had put up. I mostly looked at the blizzard going on, thinking about my bike ride home. It was a dark December evening and the snow was piling up. I just really wanted to go home. It's really snowy out there, Tom. What do you say we close up early? No one's gonna show up anyway. Over. Your jokes are funny. Over. Just 10 minutes before we closed, I heard some people coming up the stairwells. It was some kind of family. One man and a woman with 2 girls. When they came through the door, I immediately saw that they weren't ordinary. The man had a pale, almost white face and wore red lipstick. The woman was also completely pale. They all wore clothing like they used to be in the 17 or 1800s. I just had my history exam, so I recognized it immediately. While I walked towards them, I saw that they were looking around as if they were lost. "Can I help you folks?" I asked them. They looked at me with big eyes, if I was talking Chinese. I almost thought about bailing, but as we just had a meeting about customer satisfaction, I asked again, a bit louder. "Can I help you folks?" They now all looked at me, with a big smile and large eyes. I was totally creeped out and I didn't really know what to do anymore. "If I can help you, I'll be at my desk," I said, and I quickly walked away. When I was at my desk, I could still see the family just standing there, doing absolutely nothing. Tom? Have you seen this family that just came in?" Over. "No, no one's come through the entrance. You good?" Over. Now I was even more creeped out. When I looked up, I saw the man walking towards me. From the inside, I could almost cry, but I did my best not to show it. The man stood in front of me with his pale face and called out something in a language I couldn't understand. It sounded like English, but it sort of wasn't. I couldn't make out anything. I looked down at my computer to make it look like I was searching, hoping he would just take off. When I finally looked up, nobody was there. The whole floor was abandoned again. I did a quick sweep of the floor, but I found nobody. As if they just vanished. Just then, my colleague came up the stairs, and I told him what happened. He didn't believe me, and I thought I was trying to scare him. Luckily, there were security cameras in the library, so we could just watch what happened, right? After we closed the library, we went to the security office in the building and looked at the footage from earlier that evening. What I saw then was the creepiest thing ever. I was talking to nobody. The whole family wasn't on the screen. It was just me, talking to myself. Looking for a new roommate is always a daunting task. Even though you interview and take the time to get to know that person, you don't truly find out who they are until you start living with them. I had begun searching for a roommate after I decided to leave my current residency. I was contacted a couple of hours after placing an ad on the Facebook Marketplace. The message read,
"Hey Chris, I'll be moving out of my current apartment this August and I'm looking to room with someone new, as my roommates are moving to California this year. I'm 27 and I'm currently going to school. When I'm not at school, I enjoy hiking and watching movies. I also apprentice at a taxidermy shop on the days I don't have class. Hope that's not weird. It's always been a fun hobby of mine. Anyway, I'm looking forward to hearing back from you. Have a great day, Lunaire.
My first and most obvious reaction after reading the message was to check her profile. She was of medium height, had long, messy blonde hair and green eyes. In her profile picture, I saw her standing with a man and a woman shoulder to shoulder. They each adorned goofy grins and held up peace signs. Under the photo, the caption read, "Love my roommates." I smiled to myself and decided to send her a message back. The sun beat down on us as we hoisted various objects to the second floor of our new apartment. It took us a couple days to get everything out of the moving trucks and into our new place, but as soon as we did, a wave of relief washed over our sweat-drenched and sore bodies. After a couple more hours of rearranging, we each grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat on the porch. We reminisced about old 90s cartoons and what video games we obsessed over as kids, and as the sun started to set, I truly felt relaxed and confident that things were going to work out. A week later, I started a new job for a construction company that was owned by a good friend of mine. As I was getting ready, I heard the front door swing open. I walked into the living room to see Lunaire and her friend David sliding in a large box. "What you got there?" I asked. Through a strained grunt, she replied,
I bought a freezer to store some of the animals I'm planning on using in my taxidermy work. I hope that's alright.
I was obviously hesitant at first, as there was no mention of this happening in the first place, but I eventually accepted and returned to my room to continue getting ready for work. I came home at around 9 p.m. after having a couple of beers with friends and noticed that the freezer was nestled snugly in the lower part of the pantry. A low hum could be heard reverberating off of the inner walls. I was curious to see what was inside, but didn't want to intrude on Lunaire's business, so I went into my room and changed into more comfortable clothing. After changing, I came back out into the kitchen and started making a sandwich. I opened the fridge and grabbed what I needed. As I turned around, I stubbed my toe on the edge of the island countertop and let out a long, exasperated grunt. Was any bleeding? As I raised my head back up, I was greeted by a shadowy figure. Lunaire was standing in the doorway leading to her room. The darkness behind her almost seemed to envelop her.
Is everything okay?
She said in a deadpan tone. "Shit, yeah, I'm sorry. I just slammed my toe into the corner of the countertop as I was making a sandwich. I hope I didn't wake you."
It's fine.
She said in the same deflated tone as before. She then turned around and walked back into the darkness of her room.
Dude, the head tracking is so good on this. I think that's one of the things that's really impressive about the Quest 2 specifically, but even the original Quest.
I could tell that she was pissed, so I quietly made my sandwich and retreated back to my room as well, only hearing the low hum from the freezer as I closed my door. I had the next day off, so I was able to sleep in a little longer than usual. When I finally emerged from my room, I walked into the kitchen to make breakfast. As I opened the refrigerator, I noticed that the light wasn't turning on and there was a lack of cold air escaping from inside. I turned around and flipped the light switch to confirm my suspicion. Sure enough, the power was out. "Damn it," I muttered under my breath. I walked over to Lunaire's room and knocked on her door to tell her about the power outage if she didn't already know, but there was no answer. I then remembered that she had classes that day and probably wasn't home. I walked back to the kitchen and past the pantry. As I did, I slipped on the floor but was able to catch myself on the countertop. "What the?" I angrily exclaimed as I looked down at the floor trying to figure out what I had slipped on. It was blood, and it started to leak from the corner of the freezer and pool onto the floor. I quickly tried to open the freezer to find out the cause of the viscous liquid, but then I noticed that it had a padlock attached to it. I don't remember seeing that before. I ran out to my car and grabbed my toolbox from the back seat. I approached the freezer and set my tools down on the nearby padlock. It fell to the ground with a large thud. I creaked open the top of the I quickly pinched, greeted with a putrid stench that permeated my nostrils. I quickly pinched my nose and walked away gagging in response. "I guess I should have realized that was gonna happen," I muttered to myself in between gags. After gaining my composure, I grabbed some gloves from under the sink and started taking inventory. I could see a couple of dead birds in plastic bags wedged into the corners of the freezer. I took each bag out and set them in the trash can nearby. That's when I noticed that the blood was coming from the corner of the larger black bag. I don't know why, but I decided to open the top of the bag and peer inside. I was greeted by large, milky white eyes, a swollen black tongue surrounded by cracked and bloated lips, and the matted hair of a human head. I swiftly dropped the bag and fell backwards onto the floor. My breathing had ceased to exist, and I grabbed the trash can next to me and expelled my disgust into it. I then ran out the door, got into my car, and called the police. As I sat in the interrogation room with a blanket over my shoulders, I couldn't help but think about the face I'd seen. It looked so familiar. That's when it finally hit me. I pulled out my phone and looked at Lunaire's profile picture. It was her old roommate, the one she said was moving to California. When the detective entered the room, she started the questioning process, asking me if I started noticing any weird behavioral occurrences around the apartment. Yeah, I stubbed my toe the other day and she creepily stood in the doorway. It seemed like she was pissed, but for some reason I had a strange feeling like she was concerned about something. That's when I connected the dots. She didn't come out into the kitchen because she heard me stub my toe. She came out into the kitchen because she thought I slammed the freezer instead of the fridge. A cold sweat started to form on my forehead as my surroundings became blurred. I could hear a low whine slowly starting to cover up the words of concern from the detective. As my vision started to clear, I could see another officer enter the room and whisper something into her ear as he handed her a piece of paper. "Do you have somewhere you could stay at?" she asked. "I mean, I was planning on staying with my parents. They live about 30 minutes outside of town." "Okay," she paused. "Listen, I don't want to worry you, but we found this picture inside of your apartment." She slid the piece of paper across the table, and I immediately felt like someone kicked me in the chest. The head of Lunaire's other roommate sat on the chair. In the background, scrawled on the wall in blood, read, "Love my roommates. All of them."
Knock it out of the park with an Netspin prepaid MasterCard, the official prepaid card of Major League Baseball.
Moonlight peered through my window as I jolted awake. My clamorous breaths disturbed the silence of my dark room. I had just come out of a frightful dream that had me thinking it was all too real. With sweat on my brow, I sat up and grabbed my water from the nightstand and took a sip from the now warmed glass. My hands shook as I recounted my nightmare of the horn-headed man. In my dream, I was walking through my neighborhood, the streetlights flickering as I made my way down the uninhabited sidewalk. Nothing threatening, just a walk through the midnight hours. A block down, I could see a figure in the distance, walking slowly towards me. His steps seemed mismatched and labored. He passed a few houses looking straight ahead, neither looking left nor right. His head was fixed on the sidewalk in front of him. As I was getting closer to my home, I could see him slowly starting to embark on my territory. I quickly rushed to my front door and hurried inside. Through my window, I could see him walk past my property. I was thinking to myself, "Oh God, please have him keep going, please." He was just about to walk all the way past my front yard when he stopped. His body almost shifted abnormally as he turned to face my home. He just stood there, looking, not moving, just standing there. The man bore the horned head of a skeletal goat. His body was pale and looked fragile, and his fingers were thin and bony. I thought to myself, what does he want? Slowly, He started lifting a quivering arm and pointed right at me. I started to backpedal into the darkness of my house, when all of a sudden he let out an inhuman screech. That's when I woke up. Too frightened to go back to bed, I turned on the television and saw that the local news for early risers was on. My stomach dropped and my body suddenly turned cold as I listened to the current news report. The news anchor on the television said, "Breaking news. A woman who lived on Columbia Avenue has been murdered. Local officials say that they received an anonymous phone call from the victim's home. We arrived at the house at around 12:20, and we saw the victim inside in a card which rested next to her." The sheriff held up the card. On the back of it, I could see the image of the horn-headed man. The officer started to read. "One down. Slowly I go." He then lifted his head back up. His blood started trickling from his eyes and mouth. I sat there shaking, and I couldn't breathe. Columbia's just 3 blocks away from me. I jumped out of my bed and ran to my window. Something within me made me want to look outside. That's when I saw him. He just stood there, looking, not moving, just looking. The horn-headed man, his body pale and fragile, and his fingers thin and bony.
Knock it out of the park with an Netspin prepaid MasterCard, the official prepaid card of Major League Baseball. No credit check, no minimum.
It was a late, moonless, snowy night. I heard the chilling cry of a bobcat as I arrived home from my parents' house, where we had just had Thanksgiving dinner in northern Michigan. Exhausted, I had finally made it to my bed when my pregnant girlfriend asked for nacho cheese munchies. Reluctantly, I laced up my boots and went to my car. Due to the cold, it took me a while to start the car, which only made me more irritated. But eventually I got it started, and I arrived at the convenience store to retrieve my girlfriend's mandated snacks. As I left the store, walking back towards my car, I saw a shadow of movement out of the corner of my eye. What looked like a person stood near the dumpster, just out of the light. I stepped towards the figure, and she looked at me with a giant sinister smile. Her face was so weathered it looked like she had cracks all over her face. She was crouched down and appeared to be chewing on something. I looked to see what she was chewing on. To my surprise, it was a severed arm. It looked old, as if it had been rotting for weeks. I saw her glance at something in her pocket. I could see the outline of what looked like a pocket knife. As soon as I looked back up, she quickly charged me. I pushed her away and then ran back to the convenience store. I burst through the door and frantically yelled towards the cashier to call the police as I turned to lock it. He asked me, "What's going on?" I scowled at him and said, "Please, just call the cops." I looked back outside and saw the woman had moved across the street and was still scrutinizing me as she maintained her malevolent grin. "Look, there's a girl out there who's trying to kill me." Looking over me, he replied, "I don't see anyone out there, sir." Those words shook me, even to this day. When the police reached the gas station, they began looking around for the woman while one of the officers asked me what had happened, and I told him the details of the encounter. One of the officers came back and said he couldn't find anything, intently searching, but there was no proof she was ever even there, and asked me in a judgmental tone, "Are you feeling okay?" I was about to defend myself, and then I started to think. I am tired, and I have had a couple of drinks, so I just told him, "Yes, sir. Sorry for bothering you. I hope you have a nice night." And then I drove home. I got home at around 4 o'clock in the morning. My girlfriend greeted me with an angered but concerning tone of voice. She asked me,
Where were you? Are you okay?
So I told her everything that happened. Of course, she didn't believe me. I couldn't get to sleep that night. I sat in my bed questioning my sanity, wondering if it was all even real. Am I crazy? Maybe I'm just tired. But no, that can't be it. I saw it. But if I saw it, why was there no proof? Where did the arm go? Where did she go? Before I knew it, it was 7 in the morning, and I had to go to work. I threw on my jacket as I was about to head to the construction site, and I put my hand in my pocket and noticed that there was a hole in it. It wasn't there the other day. I thought, what if she caught my jacket as I ran? Which further proves my suspicion that she was real. I couldn't believe it. My mind completely went wild until my girlfriend kissed me goodbye. I told my friends at work what had happened, and they didn't believe me either. They made jokes about it the entire day, but I had my bowling tournament that day, so that gave me something to look forward to. I got home and hung my vest and jacket up and rapidly put on my bowling shoes and got my bowling ball. My girlfriend looked at me with a pleasant smile and said,
When will you be back?
Probably around 11.
Don't be long.
I won't, don't worry. At around 10:30, the tournament had finally finished and we had won. I was so thrilled I had forgotten about the woman. As we were leaving, I noticed something at the other end of the parking lot. It was that psychotic woman. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. She slowly started moving towards me while waving her knife in the air and making cuts. I quickly jumped into my car and turned it on. As I looked up, I saw she was standing in front of me, staring at me. She slowly walked over to my window and she said in a quiet, deep, and scratchy voice,
Little pig, let me in.
I was frozen in fear, but I snapped back to reality when she banged on the roof of my car, screaming. I quickly slammed my foot on the accelerator and didn't let off it until I couldn't see her anymore. When I arrived home, I told my girlfriend what had happened. Like last time, she didn't believe me. I really thought I was insane, but I tried to forget about it and get some sleep. Later that night, I woke up and saw her in my room. All she said was, "Let me in," over and over as she got closer. She then started shouting,
Let me in, let me in, let me in! Let me in! Come on, Paul. Stop being difficult.
Let me in!
I was wondering how in the world my girlfriend hadn't heard this going on. The woman was right next to me and held up a knife to me. That's when I fainted. I woke startled in my room, dripping with sweat. Then I remembered I don't have a girlfriend, nor a house, or a family.
Come on, Paul. It's time for your morning meds. Let me in.
Knock it out of the park with an Edspin prepaid MasterCard, the official prepaid card of Major League Baseball. No
I'm okay. I'm okay. Everything okay, ma'am? Huh. Goddamn shoe. There's no people. It's a quiet neighborhood. Maybe I'm just exaggerating. Is there something I can help you with, sir? Come on, man.
Knock it out of the park with an Netspin prepaid MasterCard, the official prepaid card of Major League Baseball. No
My aunt and uncle live in Fort Myers, Florida. Every winter we visit them for a weekend just to see them and escape the cold. This has been a long-time tradition, dating back to when they first moved there, about 15 years ago, so we'd been doing this almost as long as I could remember. This happened back when I was 12. My cousin Ashley, who was a year older than me, would always be there, of course, so the two of us would hang out a lot during these visits. She was cool to hang out with, and I related to her a lot, even though I was a young boy and she's a girl. She'd always be down to do the cool stuff that I'd normally do with my friends at that age. After the family dinner on the first night there, we all watched a movie together. After the movie, our parents hung out with each other in the kitchen drinking wine. They wouldn't let Ashley and I go out that late, as we were only 12 and 13, but Ashley wanted to go to a nearby canal where locals were apparently reporting having seen a 10-foot-long alligator. Basically, we both wanted to go see if we could find the gator after she convinced me. We snuck out through the back door while our parents were still in the kitchen. On our way to the canal, we stopped at the 7-Eleven on the street so we could get some snacks on the way. The cashier already told us to be careful out there, implying it was late for us to be out. The streets were deserted at this hour. The area of Fort Myers in which they live is on the significantly quieter side. We walked for like 10 minutes, and the closer we got to this canal she kept talking about, the swampier the sides of the road started to get. Ashley froze in front of me and looked straight ahead. She pointed ahead and said, "What's that guy doing?" I saw right away what she meant. At the far end of the street, there was the silhouette of this man, just standing completely still on the sidewalk. If he was walking or perhaps looking down at something in his hands, it would have been different. But him just standing still doing nothing, apparently looking off straight ahead, it just sent shivers down both our spines. Ashley said this was the only way to get to the canal, unless we cut through people's yards or gross sewage-type water. So we continued walking, but slower, more cautious now. We were half the distance from the man now, when he suddenly turned around. I don't mean he turned his head. No, he literally turned his whole body around at once without even taking a peek to see if we were coming first or anything. We stopped. He was facing us, no doubt. There was a bit of a standoff for a few seconds before he lifted his arm and started waving at us. It wasn't a normal, gentle wave of a hand. No, he was waving his whole arm. It soon transitioned into him making a come here motion with his arm. Ashley and I looked at each other, then started running away down the street, back the way we came. We got winded pretty quickly and stopped to catch our breath in front of some small yellow house. We sat on the grass of the property for a second, just gathering our thoughts. Ashley told me there are a lot of weird people that live down there, especially in the area we were just walking. Now I understood why her parents didn't want her out this late alone. We got up after a couple minutes and started walking back to her house, when we saw him again. That guy was at the end of the street, not moving once again. He was as still as he was before, his same exaggeratedly stiff, arms-flatted side posture. He was directly under a streetlight this time, so we could see his features. He was like 40. His hair seemed to be slightly slicked back. His nose seemed to be fucked up, like it was bent to the side. He was smiling too. He wasn't showing teeth though, it was a closed-mouthed smile. He once again started waving at us. Then, I still don't know why, Ashley got up and waved back at him. As she did this, he stopped waving and his smile disappeared. It was only a few seconds later that he erupted into a full-on sprint towards us. Ashley started screaming and running, I got up off the ground and ran as fast as I could after her. I was in pure shock. I think that's why I couldn't get a scream out. That, and it would take extra breath that I didn't have. We ran through people's yards, hopped over fences, and ran down different streets until we finally made it back to her house. The back door was locked now, so unfortunately we had to knock on the door, exposing us. Trying to avoid getting in trouble, we simply said we ran to 7-Eleven to get snacks. While Ashley's parents were more upset than mine, they let us off with just a slap on the wrist, telling us not to go out again at that hour. That man's face lit up under that streetlight still terrifies me to this day, 10 years later.
Knock it out of the park with an Netspend prepaid MasterCard, the official prepaid card of Major League Baseball. No credit check, no minimum balance, no cost to order. Choose your favorite Major League Baseball team card and show your support every time you pay. Order yours today at MLBNetspend.com.
Imagine you could turn this into this, or this into this, for free by doing something you do several times a day already. With Ecosia, you can. Let me show you how. Our trees suck thousands of tons of CO2 out of the air every day. While they're at it, they protect wildlife and support farmers who are dealing with ever warmer and ever drier climates. But what does planting millions of trees actually look like? So first we figured out where are these trees needed most. That led us to focus on vulnerable biodiversity hotspots, bird migration routes, and environmental crisis zones. Then our tree planting experts sought out amazing local partners who do the hard work of growing and nurturing and planting the trees in these areas. Once they're in the ground, we continue to work with these partners using satellite tech and field visits to ensure that the trees survive. It's easy to make the switch. Go get started at ecosia.org. So go ahead. Give our planet a big hug. She deserves it.
My two friends and I were having a sleepover on one of the last summer nights before the new school year started. We didn't want to end it on a dull note, so we decided later that night that we would sneak out and walk about a mile to our local high school. We live in a small town in the middle of bumfuck Massachusetts, so everything is close. Around 12 a.m., both of my friends and I left the house and started making our way to the high school. The way there was uneventful, just us walking down the road laughing, sometimes yelling, just being typical dumb teenagers like always. We walked in the middle of the road because it was late and there was hardly any traffic in general. It took about 20 minutes to make it to the high school, where all we did was lay on the turf field, look up at the stars, and talk about the summer, as well as other stupid shit that made us laugh. We actually had such a good time that we laid there for almost an hour, so when we decided to walk back, it was close to 1 o'clock. As we made our way down the road back home, we approached a T intersection. That's where we saw a car. We noticed the car was just sitting there at the stop sign, which was on our side of the road. We could only see the headlights because the rest of the car was blocked by a row of trees. No cars were coming either. Of course, it was 1 o'clock in the morning, but the car didn't move. It just sat there. My friends and I continued to approach the intersection. Suddenly, the car slowly moved further out of the intersection, turned in our direction, and began driving past us. We made out the car to be an old white Mustang. As it passed, my friend yelled something stupid about the car being a V6, making fun of it. It was funny for about 0.8 seconds until the vehicle slammed on the brakes. I felt my heart go into my throat as the car peeled into a fast U-turn. I yelled to my friends, "Run," and we all ran down the street. We ran onto the joining road where we first saw the car coming out of. As soon as I made it near the row of trees, I jumped into the woods. So did my friends a few yards down the road. We had about 3 seconds to spare before the car turned down the road. He started slow rolling down the street like he was looking for us, and when he didn't see us, he stopped. Out stepped 2 large men, one holding a massive rod. I muttered "fuck" under my breath as I hid in the leaves. They began walking towards the tree line. I quietly covered my mouth to conceal my breathing. My heart was beating so fast and hard I felt like they would hear it too. The driver, who had a big metal rod in his hand, yelled threats at us into the woods. He continued looking into the woods, along with his buddy. I could feel their eyes pass me over and over again. They just stood there, watching, listening for one of us to make a sound. If he walked only a few more yards from the tree line into the woods, he would find me. His buddy said, "Fuck it, let's go," as he started walking back to the passenger side of the car. "There'll be others out," he said. The driver took one last look into the woods and hopped into his car. The car turned around and took off back down the road past the high school leading out of town. I stayed in the woods for another couple of minutes, waiting to see if the car would come back, which it didn't. I stepped out, along with my friends further down the road, and we all ran all the way home. We made it back and tried to enjoy the rest of our night. We tried to laugh about it later, but deep down, we knew how scary that was. We thought it was just another crazy experience, until 2 days later, when we found out through some local friends of ours that a white Mustang was stolen and involved in a robbery from the next town over, the same night we were chased. I could only imagine what would have happened if those two men decided to walk further into the woods.
Knock it out of the park with an Netspin prepaid MasterCard, the official prepaid card of Major League Baseball. No credit check, no minimum balance, no cost to order. Choose your favorite Major League Baseball team card and show your support every time you pay. Order yours today at MLBNetspin.com.
Do you even know how to shop online? Because I didn't until I found out about Piggy. So Piggy searches the entire internet to find me the best deals every time. And I'll show you how to join. All you have to do is go to joinpiggy.com, click add to Chrome, click add to Chrome again, and click add extension, and you're all set. In the top right corner, you're going to see this nice classy little P, and that's how you know that you're ready to shop online. So let me show you how it works. All you have to do is go to your favorite online stores. For me, I'm going to JCPenney because I need some new old man shoes to look nice in the near future. I'm kidding. I actually really like these shoes. They're pretty slick. But all you have to do is hit activate. And when you hit activate, Piggy's going to go through the entire internet and find you the best coupons to apply to this product. Watch them work. So now Piggy went through and found me an $11.25 discount, which is amazing. I was already saving $20 on this pair of shoes, and I didn't think that there would be any more coupons, but Piggy manages to find them. I can see why they have a 5-star review and trusted by over 1 million people. You see, I'm going to shop like this online all the time because I never want to overpay. Do you?
When I was 16, I had a curfew. I wasn't allowed out past 12 on the weekends. My friend Jose was lucky enough to not have a curfew. It was a Saturday in 2013. My parents were asleep. Jose wanted to go explore some abandoned hospital across town, so I snuck out of my room very quietly and tiptoed down the stairs. I exited through the back door and grabbed my bike from the shed, then I left on my way to Jose's house. From there, I met him and we rode across town. It took about 10 minutes. I followed him the whole way, until we ended up at this fenced-off property. Inside of the perimeter was this tall brick building. It didn't look that old. It was once an active hospital many years ago. The town just never bothered to tear it down. We parked our bikes in a big bush out of sight. Next step was hopping the fence, which was easy. The third step was finding a way into the building. We scanned the perimeter by walking around the building, until we found a basement-level window that was already broken open. Jose went in first. I shined my flashlight into the window for him so he could see. It looked a little scary down there, considering how dark it was. Nevertheless, I wasn't going to bitch out now. It was my turn to enter while he held the light. Once we were in and both had our flashlights on, though, it was pretty well lit. There wasn't much in this basement level we entered into. It seemed to be mostly for storage and boiler-type rooms. We found a stairway upstairs, and once we went through this rusty door, we were on the main floor, in this hallway that still had some of the lights on. It sounds weird, but having some of the hospital lights still on just made this more eerie. Like we were a little more worried about running into someone. It's not like the whole place was lit up. There would be like one light on here and one light on down the hall, with lots of pitch black corners and dark gaps in between. There was also this loud buzzing, whistling sound that we couldn't pinpoint. It was kind of creepy. We started exploring by taking a look into each little room. Most of the expensive stuff seemed to be cleared out, like the beds and equipment. The place was kind of clean for an abandoned building, though. It seemed not many people explored it, that or just previous people didn't trash it, though there were some holes in the walls, and some things thrown on the floors, as expected. There was one room with the door closed. We tried opening it, but it was locked. Extremely weird considering every other door was opened. Jose had a good point though. Patients' sleeping room doors aren't permitted to have locks on them, so that meant something was blocking the door. We also heard noises on the other side of the door, like very, very light thump sounds. We went into the adjacent room, and there were a bunch of tiny holes in the walls. There was one hole in the wall adjacent to the next room over with the blocked door, a hole big enough to look through. I quietly got on my knees to look through it. My eyes had to adjust to the darkness, but after a second, I could see a woman in a long white dress, leaning on the far wall, seemingly looking at the door to the room. I was truly about to piss myself after seeing her. I whispered to Jose to look. He didn't believe me, but when he looked through the door, he gasped. We whispered to each other, wondering if we should get out. Jose said yes. He stood up and went to the door to the room. I got on my knees one more time to look through the hole again. As I put my eye up to the hole, the entire room was now blocked, because the woman had gotten on her knees and was looking through the hole back at me with this huge smile on her face. I screamed so loud it definitely echoed throughout the whole building. Jose didn't even ask why, he just ran for it with me back to the way we came in the basement. He crawled up through the window first, then me. The whole time I was trying to squeeze through the window, I was scared she was going to come up behind me and pull my legs back in. When we were both outside, we ran for our bikes and pedaled all the way back to Jose's. We didn't laugh about it at all. It genuinely was nightmare fuel. I went straight home after saying bye to him. I didn't feel safe being anywhere but inside my house, in my bed. I don't believe in ghosts, so I don't believe that was a ghost. I believe there was actually some psychotic woman in there. But all I'm saying is if I did believe in ghosts, I would 100% believe that's what I saw in that room.
Knock it out of the park with an Netspin prepaid MasterCard, the official prepaid card of Major League Baseball.
I was a new student to Southern Lehigh High School in Pennsylvania. Going into my junior year of high school, not knowing anyone was really rough. Everyone obviously had their friend group sorted out by then. The worst part was lunchtime, though. My school wouldn't let juniors leave for lunch, only seniors, so I had to eat in the cafeteria. I was dreading it because I knew I'd have no one to sit with, and I didn't want to force myself into a random table. When lunchtime finally came, however, I walked into the cafeteria with my tray of food looking for a place to sit. Every single table was taken. I didn't even have the option of sitting alone. But there was one table in the corner of the cafeteria with only 2 kids sitting at it. That was the least intimidating spot to sit, so I walked over and asked if I could sit there. They both looked at each other, and one of them said yeah. I noticed upon sitting down that the 2 were identical twins. They looked like they were partially of Hispanic heritage, but they didn't have accents. They honestly seemed alright. They introduced themselves as Antonio and Bruno, and they had a conversation with me. They invited me to hang out with them after school, and honestly I figured why not? I had to start off somewhere as far as making friends. I got their numbers, and after school I went home to drop off all my stuff. Shortly after I got a text from Bruno, telling me he and his brother were planning on hanging out. He told me to meet them around 9 that night at the nearby cemetery that was like a 10-minute walk from my house. He said there was a cool hangout spot near there. Plus, the first day of school was on a Friday, so we had off the next day. I had nothing to do, so I said, yeah, I'm down. When the time came, Bruno texted me one more time asking if I was still coming. I said, yeah, I'm gonna leave in a few, and confirmed we were meeting on the road by the cemetery. He said, yeah. So I began my walk in the dark to the cemetery. The longer I walked, the more I thought about my whole move and being the new kid in high school, and thinking about the fact that I was literally walking to a cemetery at night to hang out with 2 kids I just met. But anyway, I got to the little road next to the cemetery and asked Bruno where they were. He started typing right away, and he said they were in the woods hanging by a small lake that they wanted to show me. Then he promptly sent his location. So I made my way into the woods, pushing branches out of my way, using my tiny phone flashlight as my only light. I started calling for Bruno and Antonio as I felt like I was close enough, according to the location he sent me at least. Suddenly I heard footsteps, so I stopped. Definitely footsteps approaching me, but they were very low and slow. I called out that they better not be trying to scare me. When they weren't answering me though, I decided this was stupid. I turned and started walking back towards the road. But those footsteps I mentioned earlier, they turned from quiet and slow to fast, and before I could even react, someone had their nails digging into my neck, effectively choking me. I heard a familiar voice screaming, "Grab him, grab him." I managed to break free from this sort of chokehold and sprinted towards the road. I know they followed me until the tree line by the road. I was faster than them, and I could run for miles. And that's what I did. I ran straight home and told my parents. They considered calling the cops, but I thought it would be better to get pictures of the nail marks on my neck and report it to the school the next day. That's what we did, and with the help of the text that I got from Bruno, I was able to get the 2 students expelled. My parents made me block both their numbers. I didn't exactly argue with that though. My parents wanted me to confirm that these kids didn't know where we lived, and I told them simply, not as far as I know. So anyway, one night about a week later, I woke up to my room feeling really cold. I heard the sound of wind blowing into my room, and I looked at the window to see it was slid completely open. I wondered if my mom came in to open it, but that would make absolutely no sense. It was like 50 degrees out that night. I walked over to it and looked down below. A few feet below my bedroom window, there's a part of the exterior of my house that comes outward, creating a sort of ledge underneath my window that my father always told me to jump onto in case of a fire. I shut my window and walked over to my parents' bedroom. I gently knocked and opened the door, and my mom groggily asked what. I had to ask her if she opened my window. She sat up saying, "No, why?" I told her in a louder, more concerned voice now that my window was opened all the way by somebody. She started shaking my dad to wake him up and go check my room with me. But when he woke up, he told me to grow up and go back to sleep. I left my parents' door open as I walked back down the hall to my room. Then, I picked up on something that I'm surprised I picked up on. My door. It seemed to be half shut now, as opposed to completely open when I left. I pushed the door open just a little bit so I could get a look through the crack and see if, someone was behind the door. Even though I had the thought of the possibility, I never could have actually expected to see it. There was someone hiding behind my door. I screamed for my dad like a little girl. I screamed so loud I'm sure it could be heard 3 doors down. Then my door suddenly slammed shut, just as my dad came rushing out of his room over to me. I screamed, "There's people in my room," so he barged into the room and turned the light on. At that moment, we saw the leg of a person jumping out my window. My dad ran to the window, then downstairs and out the front door to attempt to chase them down, but he came back a few minutes later out of breath, saying he didn't see anyone. Full of energy and fear, I swore it had to be those twins that I got expelled. My dad called the police, and I had to talk to them when they arrived, explaining the whole story back to the incident in the woods. My father backed up my story, but without proof of who entered, they said there wasn't anything they could do. They merely ordered us to lock the doors and consider installing cameras outside. As positive I am that it was either one of or both of those twins in my room, after getting through a solid couple months of sleeping in fear, nothing to this nature ever happened again. Looking back now, I don't know why I was so willing to meet these kids in the woods at night. I should have realized in the cafeteria that day that they looked like trouble, and I should have stayed away.
Knock it out of the park with an Netspin prepaid MasterCard, the official prepaid card of Major League Baseball. No.
Freshman year of high school, 2007. Gym class, last period. We had a substitute gym teacher on one of the stormiest days of the year. He was an older man, not a senior citizen, but gray, maybe 55 to 60. He took attendance, and when he passed me, he did a double take at me, which I found a bit uncomfortable. Not to float my own boat, but I always understood I looked older and really good for a freshman in high school. The sub told us to get into our volleyball teams, and he disappeared into the hall by the locker rooms for a while. 40 minutes went by and the period was over. It was time for us to get changed and go home. I got into the locker room, but for some reason, my locker wasn't opening. I tried my usual combination over and over and over. It wouldn't click open though. I had to go to the sub and let him know to ask for my combination again. I figured maybe the combo just slipped from my mind for some reason. The sub told me to give him a few minutes and he'd get the list of locker combos. I waited outside the office, and out he finally came with a book in his hands, open to a specific page. He walked into the girls' locker room with me, which I didn't expect him to do. The locker room was basically empty now, with one girl finishing up changing. We walked over to my locker and tried the combination written down on the paper. It didn't work no matter how many times he tried it. Each time he tried it and failed, he would look at me and laugh. I would force myself to laugh along to be polite, but it started getting weird. He put his hand on my shoulder as he said, "We'll figure this out." He tried the combination again, with his hand still on my shoulder. When it didn't work again, I felt his hand slowly started inching down from my shoulder to my lower back. I pushed myself away and grabbed my bag, saying, "It's okay, I'm late for my bus." He tried a combo in the locker one more time, and it opened. He smiled and walked away. I waited till I heard the locker room door shut. Then I proceeded to getting changed quickly, when suddenly the room went dark. I finished pulling up my pants and shut my locker in the dark. I threw on my backpack and started walking to the back exit of the locker room, which led outside. I feared that the sub would be waiting right by the door for me. I got predatory vibes from him. When I got to the end of that specific aisle of lockers I was in the intersection of two rows. I'd have to turn down left to get to the exit door, but still. Naturally, I had to look right to make sure that it was clear. There was a little light seeping in from one single rectangular window that sat under the ceiling. It was enough. Enough for me to see him peeking at me from around the wall of lockers. So that's when I ran for the exit door. He came over behind me saying, wait, it's not what it looks like." I ran outside into the rain off the campus of the high school and walked the rest of the way home, giving me time to reflect on what happened. By the time I got home, soaking wet, it came to me that he most likely changed my locker combination somehow as a way of getting alone with me in the locker room. As for what he could have possibly been planning to do when he cut the lights, I never wanted to imagine. Honestly, I was too emotionally scared and quite frankly embarrassed to tell anyone about it, not even my parents or friends. It was something I just kept to myself all these years, because truthfully, I just don't feel comfortable telling people.
Knock it out of the park with an Netspin prepaid MasterCard, the official prepaid card of Major League Baseball.
When I was in high school, I was in the band. At my school, band was basically an easy A. It was either that, orchestra, or chorus, so I went with band. Anyhow, our band teacher, Mr. Nicholson, had the grading system set up so that as long as you attended class and went to your weekly lessons, you got an A. Sadly, towards the end of one quarter, I was missing 2 lessons. Because of that, my grade was a B. I went to him after class to ask if I could make up the lessons, and even though he seemed reluctant, he said he would let me come in during a lunch period and practice in one of the downstairs storage rooms to get credit for a lesson. I was more than happy with that, because realistically, I would probably just play games on my phone anyway instead of actually practicing. I arrived to the music room during my lunch period the next day. So I took my saxophone and headed down the stairs outside the music room towards the basement area for the music department. It was always kind of creepy down there because absolutely no one besides the music teachers would go down there usually, and the lights were kind of shitty. I'd only been down there a couple times before that day. But anyway, I walked down the hallway, and on either side were a bunch of doors that led into small, maybe 7 by 7 feet rooms. All of these rooms were used for storing things like chairs, music stands, spare instruments, Christmas decorations, and whatever. I stepped into one of the rooms and shut the door. I set up my music on one of the stands in the room just in case Mr. Nicholson were to come down to check on me. But really, I didn't plan on actually playing. I started playing games on my phone and then flick. Darkness. Like, as dark as it could get. Minus my phone screen. I looked over to the light switch to the room just instinctively and flicked it up and down a few times, but that did nothing. I stumbled as I got up from the seat to open the door, to more darkness. I held my phone out in front of me to light up this little hallway, even if it was just barely. I think I had like an iPhone 3 or something, and those old ones didn't have flashlights. But anyway, that little light from my phone was enough to see one of the doors open near the end of the hall, and I heard something being dragged in that room, like one of the big plastic containers. There was also manic breathing, followed by animal-like grunting. Then I saw a big plastic container being pushed out of that room into the hallway. As I saw this, I turned off my phone screen and went back into the room I was just in. I shut the door so quietly. I don't know what exactly I was thinking in that moment that I decided to hide, but I think the strange sounds I was hearing from this person, mixed with the random blackout, made me wary of staying in that hallway. Whoever that was blocking the stairs though, and of course I got no reception down in that little basement area. All I felt comfortable doing was sitting in that room and waiting for the lights to hopefully turn back on. But the lights seemed like they were never going to turn back on. So I decided I would try and get back upstairs again. I quietly opened the door with my phone in front of me for light. Then I stepped into the hall. I inched up a little closer to the stairs, then I heard something again. I quickly crept into the next closest room with the door open and shut it. I still didn't know what I was hiding from. Could it have been a staff member or janitor? At that point, the only reason I had of thinking it wasn't was because they only appeared down there after the lights turned off. I stood in that room in complete darkness, only listening and waiting for another sound from outside. But you know how when you're in a room with someone, even if you don't necessarily hear them, you can kind of just sense their presence? That's suddenly the feeling I got standing in that pitch black room. I lifted my shaking hand up and pressed the home button on my phone to turn on the screen, just for half a second. That was enough to see someone standing in the corner of this little storage room, 3 feet away from me. I pretended I didn't see anything, but it was too late. Shh, is what I heard, breaking the silence. Then, a hand patted my shoulder twice and started squeezing it. I basically dove for the doorknob, struggling to find it at first, but pulling the door open when I did. The man in the room with me tried pushing the door shut after I opened it, but I was already out. I ran up the stairs and out the door to the main level of the music hall, where the lights were still on. I ran to Mr. Nicholson to tell him, out of breath. He called security to check the basement section of the music hall, but security came back upstairs and said besides a bunch of music equipment moved around, there wasn't anyone down there. The rest of the period, Mr. Nicholson canceled his flute lesson, and I sat there in the room with him and 5 flute players, explaining the whole story in detail. Without cameras in the music hall, there was no way of catching whoever went down there and killed the power for the basement. It seemed that he was trying to steal expensive music equipment. That, or God knows what else. The next day, I was called into the dean's office to give my story of what happened, and the rest is history.